So now we're ready to move into how we actually start adjusting volume and how we really like start altering and changing around our files in Audition. So the main thing to know would be that again, there's a difference between your waveform viewer and the multi-track viewer. So the multi-track viewer would be the one we're going to use most of the time, where we're like stacking different clips on top of each other. And of course, you can always change your view on this by, if you kind of mouse down over, and you'll see a little icon change where it'll go from hand or whatever tool you have selected to this little thing with two arrows pointing in both directions. You can like make your waveform viewer bigger or smaller just by clicking and dragging on that, which can be quite nice for like just getting in there and looking at things in detail. So you can do that in the multi-track. But what happens if I'm kind of playing along here and all of a sudden I see a track where I have like a big bounce, right? Or I kind of want to get rid of a little section of something, or I want to just tone it down a little bit. Um, One way that you can do that would just be to go in here and just kind of double click that item. So again, if you're in the multi-track, you just double click it, and that's going to sort of isolate out that track into like the waveform. So we're only seeing that one track by itself. And you can kind of see from the waveform that this is much louder right there, right? So it kind of, something happened where it got a little bit messed up. And so I can just move this thing around to get it kind of out of the way. I'm going to want to go in here, and you'll see if you come down off of the playhead kind of area down in here, it turns from like kind of a pointer finger into more of like a, I don't know, italicized thing. So what you can do here is just click and drag on that, and that's going to isolate the thing that you're altering, right? So maybe I just want to alter that much time in my one track, right? So I'm just going to go in here now, and I can crank my decibels down, so maybe it kind of matches what I have in the rest of them, so it doesn't pop quite so much, right? Then if I just click off now, when I play through that big sound kind of like went away, right? And I could go in there, I could delete the whole area, so I could just click here and really crank those decibels down to almost nothing, right? So you can kind of see the change there. And now if I go back to my playhead, it's gonna basically make that disappear in there. So that's one way to alter it. And so I'm doing that to this whole file that you'll see over here. And now if I go back to multi-track, I've altered that file quite a bit as we're working our way through it. So that's one way to go about adjusting volume and changing things around. And it's just good to know the difference between the multi-track viewer and the waveform viewer. It's pretty important, right? So remember, you can change what you're looking at. You can change the mixer. You can change the zoom here. Don't go to the mixer yet, probably, because look at all those buttons. It's terrifying, right? We're going to stay simple. So now your job will be just to start layering together a whole bunch of different sounds, right? And so there's lots of different ways that we could do it, but let's try to pick one out and just kind of play around with it, right? So I'll go with this one, which is like from, I think, outer space, as I recall, or this one might be the whale sounds actually. So now if I just press play on this, I'm going to hear both things happening kind of at the same time, right? And you can see that one of these is much longer than the other. So again, I can use this zoom tool to kind of zoom out, so I can kind of see the whole clip all the way through, and it tells me about how long it is. And this clip will eventually run out, right? So the sort of watery sound's going to go away. And so one thing that you'll often run into is you kind of wish a track would go for quite a while. You wish it would kind of continue looping, right, and changing. And so one thing you could do would just be to like copy this. You can hit Command C and then go down here, this one, and go Command V, and it'll stack them. So you can kind of like, remember, you can always like rearrange these if you want to also. So you could do it that way. You could also drag this up and just drop it in next to it, so it'll keep looping. But sometimes you'll get a really hard change in between these two items. So what I would probably suggest you learn how to do would be to learn how to loop things. So again, if I zoom in a little bit more on this one track that I want to loop, and I make sure I have it selected, I can right click again, control click, however it works on your computer, and go in here, and I'm going to click this button that says loop. So if I click that, you see a little icon here that will show up that says that the clip is looped. But if I just go to play it now, it's not going to actually loop for me, right? Because it's, the timeline doesn't continue, but I clicked the right button. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to click the edge here, and remember that this is just like your non-destructive kind of window into what you're doing, and you can just click and drag it out like this, and now you can see, okay, it's looping every time. Oops. And you can see these little dotted lines show you where the clip kind of begins to kind of loop, right? That's kind of nice because you have, the same sound kind of going over and over and over again. That might kind of useful. And if I want to like cut it out, I can, pull it back to here. I can just start or stop it by just changing the end points here by clicking and dragging on them with that move tool. So that's one thing you could do to change sound. So I could go in here and like make things louder or quieter by just adjusting, the whole clip, right? So I could double click that one and just crank this down a little bit so it's not quite so loud, and then I go back to multi-track and you can see it's made the changes for me, right? Which is one way to do it, but another kind of more powerful way to do things like this sometimes is to go in and actually do what we call keyframing. So keyframing is going to be really important as you work in animation and time-based media programs like this. And so keyframing is basically you can tell the software to make an adjustment between one point and another point, and you tell it which variables you want it to transition between, and it will automatically interpret the data from one spot to the next. It's kind of a fast, I don't know if it makes sense, but it's kind of like a fast cheater way of getting through things, right? So if I click on a item that I want to keyframe, the thing you have to do is you have to go up here and go and make sure you're in multi-track, click up here, and you want to go down to this one that says enable clip keyframe editing, which just basically means you can if you don't have this this little check mark next to it, you're not going to be able to do what I'm going to show you next. So, and now if you zoom in even further, you'll see there's a little bit of a kind of a yellow, over here. It's a yellow line in here, right? And this yellow line is kind of your volume, right? And so, if I wanted to keyframe my volume so it gets quieter and then louder, I can click here and just drag these decibels down, and you'll see I'm dragging this way down here to almost nothing. So I play that, I can't really even hear that at all. So then so that's where the sound will start. Then if I command click on it, I don't know if you can see, there's this little diamond that shows up there. So when I command click on that yellow line, there's a diamond, and if I click and drag here, add another diamond. Does that make sense? So now I can begin with my volume way down, and then as it hits that diamond, the computer's going to say, okay, now start ramping the volume up as it goes, right? And so now you can kind of hear the other sound that was above it. So if I crank it way up above, my 0 point decibels, it will, really start hearing it, which is great. So that all works out well, and I can do the same thing down here. Like if I want to transition between these two, I could just hit, again, command click on the line, and then add another keyframe, and then I could swap these out. So maybe this one's really loud, and then that one's really quiet. And so now if I go back, it's gonna they're gonna change which one's loud and which one's quiet, and I can really bounce the sound all over the place through this whole clip. Just by playing around with keyframing. So it's a really powerful, amazing tool. We use it all the time in video editing, also for visual effects. So keyframing is an important concept. And this timeline lets you kind of see the whole thing visually represented. And so, if I knew I was looping this forever, this file forever, I could come in here and just keep, I can make this whole thing match, and then I can keep altering it. So if I add another command click here, you'll see it adds another diamond, and I can pull that one down and add another diamond here, and then another diamond there, and then maybe another one, so I can do all kinds of crazy stuff. So now as I push play on this, it's gonna, the volume will change on me as I get closer to that zigzag that I put into the timeline. So So again, this is making alterations to that loudness and quietness uh, of the clip, like, but not the whole clip, just in those particular places, just a little faster and easier way to do what we've been trying to do. So I hope that all makes sense. And you can do that with, if you click here, you'll see you got options for the mix. You can change all this stuff around. You can go to, make lots of different changes to it. You can change the pan in the same way, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. So that is the main way that you would like go about altering and changing your soundscape kind of like project, and messing around with how the volume will change and alter, and you can loop things. So those are probably the basics that you need just to really get going with this. So I'd suggest you get started and see what happens. Make your own cool things go on with all the different kinds of sounds. You can stack as many tracks kind of as you want to in here, and so knock yourself out. Have a grand time.